Hello, my friends. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing.
I still have the receipt in my email, time-stamped and unremarkable, like proof of something ordinary that shouldn't exist anymore. 3 nights at a coastal rental in Oregon, paid in full, booked 6 months in advance. A simple vacation, a reset. I tell myself that if I hadn't kept that receipt, I might believe it was all stress, imagination, or grief looking for a place to land. But something went wrong on that trip, and whatever it was didn't stay there. I took the vacation alone. That's important. People always ask if anyone else experienced it with me, as if shared terror would make it more real. I needed the solitude. I just turned 38, recently divorced, and burned out in a way sleep couldn't fix. I wanted fog, ocean air, and silence. No nightlife, no crowds. Just a small town on the map called Alder Cove, the kind of place you pass through without meaning to. The drive itself felt like part of the escape. 2-lane highways, thick forests, cell service blinking in and out. The closer I got, the quieter the world became. Even the radio faded into static. I remember thinking it was nice, peaceful, like the volume of life had finally been turned down. The rental was a standalone house perched on a bluff overlooking the water. Weathered gray siding, wide windows, a wraparound deck that leaned slightly toward the sea. It looked old but cared for, like someone loved it once and then moved on. The host had sent detailed instructions, including a warning that the nearest grocery store was 20 minutes away and closed early. I should have paid more attention to that. Inside, the house smelled faintly of salt and old wood. Nothing unpleasant, just aged. The decor was simple, almost sparse. No family photos, no personal touches. Just furniture that felt chosen to blend in rather than stand out. There was a guest book on the kitchen counter, thick with handwritten notes. I skimmed a few entries. Couples thanking the host. Families talking about sunsets in Wales. One entry stood out because it was short. Beautiful place. Left early. No date. No explanation. I laughed it off and went about unpacking. That first evening was textbook perfect. I cooked pasta, poured a glass of wine, and watched the sky turn orange over the water. The ocean was louder than I expected, a constant low roar, like distant traffic that never stopped. By the time I went to bed, I felt relaxed for the first time in months. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. I know the time because the clock by the bed was glowing red, bright in the darkness. I hadn't woken from a dream. There was no grogginess, no confusion. My eyes snapped open as if someone had called my name. At first, I didn't move. I listened. The house was quiet, but not empty. That's the only way I can describe it. There was a sense of something being present, not in a ghostly way, but like the awareness you get when someone is standing just outside your line of sight. The ocean was still roaring, but beneath it was another sound, subtle and rhythmic. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the lower level. I told myself it was the house settling, or maybe the wind. Old buildings make noise. That's normal. But these sounds had a cadence to them. A pause between each step, like whoever was walking knew exactly where they were going. I stayed in bed for what felt like a long time, staring at the door. When the footsteps stopped, I almost laughed from relief. Then the doorknob turned. Just slightly. Not enough to open the door. Just enough to let me know it could. I don't remember deciding to get up. I just did. I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and flung the door open, heart pounding, ready to confront a break-in, an animal, anything with a shape and a reason. The hallway was empty. Every door was closed. The house felt still again, almost expectant. I checked every room, locked the front door twice. There was no sign of anyone else. I went back to bed and didn't sleep again until morning. In daylight, the fear felt foolish. I made coffee and stood on the deck, watching seabirds skim the water. Everything looked normal. Safe. I told myself it was jet lag or anxiety shaking loose now that I'd finally slowed down. That day I explored the town. Alder Cove was smaller than I expected. One diner, one gas station, a bait shop, and a general store that sold a little of everything. The people were polite but distant, the way locals often are with tourists. I asked the woman at the register how long she'd lived there. "All my life," she said, not smiling. I mentioned the rental on the bluff. Her eyes flicked up to mine, just for a second. "Nice view," she said. "Weather changes fast out there." That was it. Conversation over. That night, I left every light on before going to bed. It didn't help. I woke again, this time to the sound of breathing. Not mine. It was coming from the corner of the room, slow and measured, like someone asleep. I froze, unable to move, my body locked in a paralysis I'd never experienced before. I could see the corner clearly. There was nothing there. No shape, no shadow, just the sound, unmistakably human. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. The breathing grew closer, louder, until it felt like it was right next to my ear. Then a whisper, so soft I almost missed it. "You weren't supposed to stay." When I finally snapped free, the sound vanished. I sat up, gasping, the room empty and silent once more. I didn't sleep at all after that. The next morning, I packed my bag. I told myself I was being smart, not scared. That if a place made you uncomfortable, you left. Simple as that. But when I tried to check out early through the rental app, it wouldn't load. No service. No Wi-Fi. The landline phone in the kitchen was dead. I drove into town, planning to get cell service and figure it out from there. But halfway down the narrow road that led off the bluff, my car stalled. No warning lights. No sputtering. Just dead. I sat there, hands shaking on the wheel, staring at the trees crowding the road. When I tried the engine again, it turned over like nothing had happened. I drove back to the house. That afternoon, the fog rolled in thick and fast, swallowing the view entirely. The world shrank to a few feet beyond the windows. I felt like I was inside a bubble, cut off from everything else. The house creaked and shifted as the temperature dropped. The ocean sounded closer, angrier. That's when I noticed the door in the hallway I hadn't opened before. It was narrow, almost flush with the wall, painted the same color so it blended in. I was sure it hadn't been there before, but that was impossible. Houses don't grow new doors. I stood in front of it for a long time before reaching for the handle. It was cold to the touch. The door opened onto a staircase descending into darkness. I don't know why I went down. Curiosity, maybe, or the sense that whatever was happening wouldn't stop until I faced it. The stairs were steep and uneven, leading to a small room carved into the rock beneath the house. No windows, just bare stone walls and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room was a chair. It was old, wooden, worn smooth by use. There were marks on the floor around it, scuffs and scratches like someone had struggled there. On the wall behind it, words had been carved directly into the stone. "You stayed too long." I backed up, my foot catching on the bottom step. The light flickered, and for a split second, I saw something sitting in the chair. It looked like me. Not a reflection. Not a twin. It was me, but wrong. Thinner. Pale. Eyes too dark. It smiled with my mouth, a slow, knowing grin. Then the light went out. I ran. I don't remember getting back upstairs. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I just remember the front door slamming behind me and the sound of the ocean rising to a deafening roar as I sprinted to the car. The fog was so thick I could barely see the hood. The road off the bluff was gone. Not blocked. Not washed out. Just not there. Where it should have been was a sheer drop into fog and darkness. I slammed on the brakes, heart in my throat. Behind me, the house loomed, lights blazing in every window. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that if I went back inside, I wouldn't come out again. I slept in the car that night, parked as far from the house as I could get. I didn't close my eyes. I watched the fog shift and listened to footsteps circle the vehicle, stopping just out of sight. Sometimes I heard my own voice calling my name, begging me to come inside where it was warm. At dawn, the fog lifted. The road was back. I didn't hesitate. I drove until the trees thinned and cell service returned. I pulled over at the first gas station and vomited in the trash can. When I finally checked my phone, there were no missed calls, no messages. The rental app showed my stay as completed. 3 nights. I know I left after 2. I went home and tried to forget. I told myself it was exhaustion, fear feeding on isolation. I threw myself into work. I avoided the coast. Then, a month later, I woke up at 2:17 a.m. in my own bed. The room felt crowded. The air was heavy, and from the hallway outside my bedroom, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps coming closer. I don't vacation anymore. I don't travel alone. And I don't ignore the feeling when a place tells me I don't belong there. Because some places don't want visitors. They want replacements.
I never thought a simple house party could turn into something I never forget, something that still haunts my dreams. But that night, the line between reality and something else completely dissolved. I can still see it all clearly, smell it, feel it, even though everyone else would probably think I'm insane if I told them. It started like any other Friday night. My friends had convinced me to come to this party out in the suburbs. One of those sprawling, rented houses that looked normal from the outside but fell off when you got closer. I parked on the street and noticed immediately that the driveway was littered with trash, plastic cups, and broken bottles, like the house had been hosting parties for weeks straight. The windows were dark, but I could hear laughter faintly through the walls. My gut twisted. I should have turned around and left. I didn't. Inside, the place was packed. People were everywhere, dancing in the living room, lounging on couches, some in small groups, whispering and laughing. The smell was a mix of beer, smoke, and something else I couldn't name. The host, a guy named Ryan, found me almost immediately. He was charismatic, funny, someone who made you feel like you belonged instantly, even though I'd never met him before. "Glad you made it," he said, handing me a drink. "Just relax, have fun." The first hour was fine. Music thumping, people talking, drinks flowing. But then things started to feel different. I noticed that some of the people at the party weren't acting normally. It wasn't the drunk kind of weird. There was something unnatural about the way they moved, the way their heads tilted when they listened, their eyes too wide, too still. I brushed it off as paranoia. I went outside for some air. The backyard was huge, lined with trees, a small pool in the middle. I lit a cigarette and leaned against the railing. That's when I saw the first person disappear. I don't mean they left or walked around a corner. One moment, a girl was there, laughing with friends. The next, she was gone. I blinked, thinking I had imagined it, but then another person vanished right in front of me. I froze. Nobody else seemed to notice. I ran back inside, and that's when I realized the doors were all locked. The front door, the back door, even the garage locked. I tried calling my friends, but no one answered. My phone, fully charged when I arrived, now showed no signal at all. Panic started to set in. I ran through the house, yelling, trying to find someone, anyone. The rooms were different. Hallways twisted in ways that didn't make sense. Doors led to rooms I hadn't noticed before, and the music upstairs had stopped completely. It was silent, except for the faint sound of breathing that wasn't mine. I found Ryan in the kitchen. He was standing perfectly still, staring at a wall, as if listening. I grabbed his shoulder, and he turned slowly. His eyes were black, not just dark black, hollow like pits. I screamed, but he didn't make a sound. Then he lunged at me. I ran, knocking over chairs, crashing through rooms I didn't know existed. I felt like the house was shifting around me, like it was alive, reshaping itself. Hallways stretched impossibly. Doors appeared where there had been walls, and shadows moved on their own, following me. I hid in a closet, heart hammering. Through the slats, I could see people moving down the hall, but they weren't really people anymore. Their limbs stretched in unnatural angles, heads jerking unnaturally. They were whispering, but I couldn't understand the words. The shadows of the walls themselves seemed to lean closer, as if the house wanted me to see, to feel. I stayed there for what felt like hours, not daring to breathe. Finally, I heard a whisper right next to my ear. "You can leave if you want to play." I turned sharply. No one was there, but the words echoed in my mind. Play? What kind of sick joke was this? My hand brushed the floor and I felt a card. Not a regular playing card, black, smooth, with a single word written in crimson. Take. I picked it up. Another card appeared beside it. Choose. I realized then that the house was forcing me into something. A game. And this game was dangerous. I had to play. I followed the cards. Each led me to another room. Each card giving me instructions, each more terrifying than the last. One said, "Enter." The room was full of mirrors, and in each reflection I saw myself, but twisted, eyes bleeding, mouth frozen in a scream, hands reaching out. One of the reflections stepped out. I ran, slamming the door behind me, and it vanished. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. I lost track of time. The house kept changing, reshaping, confusing me. I started seeing glimpses of people who had disappeared earlier, trapped behind walls, screaming silently, their faces pressed against the surfaces like the house had consumed them. At one point, I ended up in the attic. Dusty, dark, a single beam of moonlight through the broken window. And there in the center was a book, large, leather-bound, with no title. It was open, pages flipping on their own. I approached it, and words formed as I watched. The party chooses. You cannot leave. I realized the truth then. This house didn't just host parties. It consumed them. Every laugh, every cheer, every guest, it fed on their presence. And now it had me. I tried to run back downstairs, but the stairs led to a wall. The house was a maze, shifting impossibly, and I was trapped. I screamed until my throat burned. Shadows filled the corners, whispers grew louder, and the floor beneath me felt like it was pulsing. Then I saw a doorway I hadn't noticed before. Light spilled through it, warm, inviting. I ran toward it, desperate. And when I stepped through, I was outside. The street was empty, quiet, like nothing had happened. The house was dark, silent, perfectly normal. I looked around. My friends were gone. The party was gone. The street lights flickered softly, and a breeze carried the scent of damp leaves. I wanted to leave immediately, but something made me turn back. The front door of the house creaked open slowly. And standing there was Ryan, smiling, holding the black cards. He didn't speak, didn't move his lips, just stared at me. Then he raised the deck and tossed it toward me. The cards landed at my feet, and I realized the first card I saw was now blank, waiting for a new word to appear. I ran. I never looked back. Weeks later, I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, some kind of mass intoxication or shared anxiety. But I couldn't forget the faces in the mirrors, the whispers, the way the house breathed and pulsed. I couldn't forget the cards. And one night, when I checked my mailbox, I found a single black card. One word written in crimson. Invite. I never went to another party. I never told anyone. But sometimes, late at night, I hear faint laughter outside my window, and I know it's coming for me. The house doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. I've always loved exploring off-the-beaten-path trails, where few people go and even fewer survive the isolation without their nerves unraveling. I had been warned about the Mill Hollow Trail in northern Georgia. Locals whispered about it online. Stories of hikers getting lost, people seeing strange shadows, and vehicles disappearing without a trace. But that kind of reputation only drew me in. I was eager to test my Jeep, my skills, and my courage. I set out early on a Friday, loaded down with supplies, extra fuel, water, a couple of spare tires, a sleeping bag, and my backpack. The first few miles were scenic and peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the thick trees, the dirt trail winding past rocks and shallow streams. I felt exhilarated, bouncing over roots and dodging fallen branches. It was everything I loved about off-roading: freedom, solitude, and the thrill of the unknown. The trail started to change as I ascended. Rocks became jagged, roots tangled across the path, and the canopy closed overhead, letting only thin shafts of sunlight reach the ground. I felt a creeping unease, a sense that I was being watched, but I shrugged it off as paranoia. I'd driven harder trails than this before. Then I saw the first sign something was wrong. A tree leaned at a violent angle, almost collapsing onto the trail. Carved into its bark were letters, deep scratches spelling, "Turn back." I laughed nervously, assuming it was some teenager's prank. But as I drove past, movement flickered between the trees, slender, shadowy figures darting behind trunks. I blinked and they were gone. The afternoon light began to fade as I climbed higher. The trail narrowed to a single lane, mud sucking in my tires, rocks catching the undercarriage. I navigated carefully, but my GPS started acting up. The signal flickered, coordinates jumped around, and trails appeared and disappeared on the screen. A knot formed in my stomach. Something about the place didn't want me there. By late afternoon, I came across a small clearing. I thought it would be the perfect spot to rest, check my supplies, and possibly camp if needed. That's when I noticed footprints circling the Jeep. They weren't human or animal, too narrow, elongated, and irregularly spaced. It looked like they had been pacing, watching, studying me. I felt panic rising, but tried to remain rational. I loaded my gear back into the Jeep and drove cautiously along the trail. That's when I heard it, the whispering. Faint at first, almost like the wind calling my name. Chris, Chris, come closer. I froze. No one was there. The voice came again, louder, almost commanding. My pulse raced. I tried to tell myself it was imagination, stress, fatigue. I pressed on, but the trail became treacherous. Muddy inclines, fallen logs, and rocks blocked the way. I had to use the Jeep's winch to pull myself over a particularly steep patch. Each time I looked back, I thought I saw figures flitting at the edges of my vision, tall, thin, limbs bending in ways no human body should. They didn't chase, they didn't make noise, but I could feel their gaze. Night fell, bringing a thick fog that swallowed the trail. I realized I was lost. My GPS showed trails that didn't exist, trees seemed to shift, and every path I took led me back to the same dense patch of woods. I abandoned the idea of camping in the open and decided to keep moving, hoping to find an exit. Then I saw the cabin. It appeared suddenly, almost out of nowhere. Rotting wood, a sagging roof, windows dark but glowing faintly. Desperation drove me inside. Dust covered the floor, broken furniture lay scattered, and symbols were scratched into the walls. In the corner, crouched in shadows, was something that looked human but wrong. Its limbs were impossibly long, joints bending backward, and its head tilted unnaturally. Its hollow eyes focused on me. I bolted outside. The fog thickened immediately, shadows moving closer. The forest seemed alive, branches grabbing, roots tripping me. I ran blindly, slipping in mud, scratches tearing my arms and legs. The trail twisted in ways that made no sense, leading me in loops back to the cabin, over and over. Exhausted, I stumbled into a creek, water up to my knees, icy and fast. I followed its bank, hoping to find a road. Figures emerged from the fog on both sides, moving silently, jerking unnaturally, watching. I didn't dare look directly at them, just kept running along the creek. Hours later, or maybe longer, I stumbled onto an overgrown dirt road. My heart leapt. I followed it until I saw a pair of headlights. I waved frantically. The truck slowed, and I collapsed into the passenger's seat, covered in mud, blood, and sweat, shaking, babbling incoherently about shadows, whispers in the cabin. I never returned to Mill Hollow. I sold my Jeep. I quit off-roading. I tried to convince myself it was stress, hallucinations, fatigue. But I know the truth. The forest is alive. It moves. It watches. Some trails are not meant to be traveled. Some roads, once entered, never truly release you. I learned that the hard way. I had always loved Halloween. Even as a kid, there was something magical about the way the air felt that night, the way darkness seemed to thicken. But that year, Halloween became something I'll never forget, something that changed me. I had recently moved to a town in western Pennsylvania, tucked between hills and thick forest. My house was just a few yards from the edge of the trees locals called Black Hollow. Everyone avoided it after dark, but I was new, and I thought of it as a scenic shortcut. The week leading up to Halloween, I noticed odd things. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Leaves rustled when the wind was still. At night, I thought I heard whispering, distant voices murmuring my name. My cat hissed at corners where nothing seemed to be. Halloween night arrived crisp and clear. By 10 o'clock, most of the revelers had gone home. I decided to take a walk toward the forest, enjoying the quiet. The path into Black Hollow was narrow. The deeper I went, the stranger it became. Branches like fingers brushed my shoulders. Then I saw the lights, flickering orange like torches, but there was no source. I followed them to a clearing. In its center was a circle of stones. Around the circle, figures crouched in tattered cloaks, wearing masks of grotesquely exaggerated human faces. Then the whispers began. "Ethan, Ethan, come closer." My heart raced. I tried to retreat, but my feet refused to obey. The circle pulled me in, the air pressing against my chest. A figure rose, tall and thin, its head cocked unnaturally. I understood then it wasn't human. Panic surged, and I finally broke free, sprinting blindly into the forest. The woods changed. Paths twisted impossibly. Every turn led me deeper until I stumbled into a second clearing. There was a cabin, small and crooked. Its door opened before I could touch it. Inside, the cabin was larger than it should have been. In the center stood a mirror, tall and black, rippling like liquid. My reflection smiled when I didn't, tilting its head as if mocking me. Fear rooted me to the spot. Then my reflection raised a hand, and I felt a pull like gravity itself had shifted. I fell forward through the mirror into a space that defied logic. The sky above was black, but stars I didn't recognize shimmered. The ground was uneven, stitched together from impossible fragments. Figures moved in the distance, humans but wrong. Their faces stretched, eyes hollow. Some wore masks like the ones in the stone circle. Others wore my face, grinning, beckoning me toward them. I ran, though I didn't know where. The forest around me was alive, shifting, growing taller, twisting endlessly. Shadows followed me, brushing against my skin, tugging at my clothes. I stumbled into a river of black water, and the faces of countless people swam beneath the surface, mouths opening and closing silently. A figure appeared on the opposite bank, tall and thin, with a mask impossibly smooth and white. Its hand reached out, and I felt the pull again stronger than before. I grabbed a branch, swinging wildly, hitting the reflection in the water. The river erupted, faces screaming silently. I scrambled up the bank, my lungs burning. Then I saw it, a second cabin, larger, surrounded by mirrors, each one reflecting twisted versions of me. The largest mirror rippled, and my reflection stepped out. It moved independently, advancing toward me. I noticed a candle on a dusty table. A voice not mine whispered, "Light it." Desperation gave me courage. I struck a match. The flame flickered to life. Shadows recoiled. Mirrors cracked. The reflection screamed. A soundless, horrible scream that echoed inside my head. I was thrown backward, landing hard on the forest floor. I woke to normal trees, moonlight spilling through leaves. The cabin, the shadows, the mirrors, they were gone. I ran home, gasping, thinking I had escaped. But I hadn't. Shadows lingered in corners. Reflections didn't match my movements. Whispers haunted the edges of my vision. On my porch appeared a mask, my face blank and expressionless. I tried to destroy it, burn it, throw it into the river. Each time it returned. Hollow Woods waits patiently. Every Halloween, the pull grows stronger, the whispers louder. I feel it now, even as I write this. One day, I will be unable to resist. If you ever hear of hollow woods, never go near it. Never follow lights that shouldn't exist. Because if you do, it will find you, and there will be no escape. Halloween isn't just a night of fun, it's a night of selection. And Hollow Woods is always hungry.
Thanks for watching, my friends. If you want more true horror, like, comment, and subscribe.